Hello everyone and welcome to Business Analysis Career Start, a short course presented by IT Masters on behalf of Charles Sturt University. My name is Guy Coward and I will be your MC tonight and for the duration of this course. Your mentor is Karen Sleeman, who you will hear from shortly. Before we begin, just some housekeeping. All webinars for this course will be held at 8 o'clock Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time, or 11 hours plus UTC, with recordings made for those of you who cannot attend on a given night. Despite this, if you can make it, we hope that you'll attend all the live webinars and contribute to a collaborative learning environment. We think that attending the webinars is the way to get the most out of these short courses. Before we begin, a few words on Zoom's webinar functions. We encourage the asking of questions and the use of chat during the webinar, and there are two ways to do so that we use. We ask that you direct all course content related questions to the Q&A section. So that's questions you want Karen to answer, and that you send all administration type questions to the support team in chat. You can chat either with panelists only or to your fellow students as well. And you can make that choice by toggling through the drop-down box once you've opened the chat log. There are usually some very experienced industry-based attendees who will be most helpful with any queries you may have. We'll have Q&A sessions periodically, and if there's a particularly relevant question, I'll interrupt the webinar just to clarify something if it's needed. For those of you who have never taken part in a short course with us, IT Masters is a training organisation that exists as a partner to CSU, or Charles Sturt University, who we work with to create and deliver a number of their master's courses. We also market these courses on their behalf and think and hope that the best way to do that is to give some of it away free. If we do a good enough job, then students will be encouraged to enrol in the full masters if it suits them. With that said, this course stands alone in its own right, and I think it's its own reward. We want you to learn some useful information, have some fun, and hopefully make connections with your fellow students. Chantel and Angus are around tonight in an administrative and technical support role for IT Masters. They're also responsible for the learn.itmasters.edu.au website, which is where you'll find the other materials needed for this course: readings, discussion forums, quizzes, and audio lectures, pre-recorded as well, which is great. If you have any questions tonight or later on, please feel free to contact us using the details on that page, and we'll try and get to them as soon as possible. There's a lot of you, so it might take us a few days. Bear with us. And next week, I'll talk a bit about CSU and give you an idea of what studying with CSU is all about, and also how these short courses can help you in completing a course. So if you have any questions about that, maybe wait for a week and I'll answer them then. Karen is one of our senior project management lecturers at CSU. She spent the past 15 years in the public sector as a business analyst, project manager and coach, and she has qualifications aplenty. I'll let her talk about them. Her subject ratings for CSU are through the roof, so I'm most excited to introduce Karen Sleeman. Please make her feel welcome. All right, so it looks like we're having some technical issues. We'll see how we're going. Are you there, Karen? That's okay. Teething issues, that's how we go, folks. Can I please have a quick ping in the chat to see whether people can hear me? Thank you, Alex and everyone. Looks like there's an issue somewhere else, and we've got Karen logging in with a different account.
I'm so sorry, guys. I just had
not a concern at all.
Issue there. For some reason, it was telling me Zoom was not responding. So my apologies there. Just want to make sure that you can now see my screen. It should be coming up there now for you.
Yes, that's all there. Thank you.
My apologies. So I just had to log back out and log back in again. So
that's okay. I was just blowing up your tyres.
Oh, wonderful.
I was saying how much experience you've got in the public sector as a business analyst and project manager, and that your subject ratings are through the roof. Look out, Brenton Birchmore. and how excited I am to introduce you to short courses. I'm very excited to work with you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Guy. And thanks everyone for coming along this evening. I'm really excited. This is my first short course, so I hope you do enjoy it. I know that I've enjoyed putting it together for you and enjoy the opportunity to talk about business analysis and project management related things whenever I get the opportunity. So thanks for joining me. As Guy said, we'll be having these webinars on a weekly basis throughout the short course. So I really do hope as many of you as possible can join me. Now that you've heard me speak, you'll know why Guy has the job of doing the nice introductions and not me, because I am a fast talker. So please do let me know if you need me to slow down as we go through. Okay, so just wanted to get started on a little bit of information for you about the short course that we've put together for you here. I hope you do find the content enjoyable and challenging. One of the things we're going to be talking about this week is understanding the objective of the BA. So that is our very first topic. Some of the things that are covered in that topic: why business analysis, understanding your role and your objectives as a BA. You may not be a professional full-time BA. You may have come into business analysis from some functional part of the organisation, or you may have learned recently about business analysis as a potential career opportunity, and you might be thinking that you'd really like to give that a go. So this course is really designed to help you kickstart a career in business analysis. So there's a little bit about that, understanding the organisation and its environment, and analysing the business problem, just to get that foundation of BA work started in week one. We're then going to do 2 weeks where we focus on the core skills required to be a business analyst. So they're the skills that you need to be able to perform effectively as a BA and to be able to complete BA tasks that are commonly expected of a BA. We're going to talk firstly in week one. I've tried to put together some of the softer skills in week one. I think they're extremely important. Firstly, talking about time management skills. BAs are very, very busy people. So talking about some of the things that you will need to do to be able to manage your time effectively. Talking about working with stakeholders. It's such an important part of being a BA, is to work with your stakeholders effectively. So how to build some rapport with your stakeholders and really get their interest and their engagement. Facilitation and presentation skills is one of the parts to week 2 as well. And of course, the verbal communication and listening skills are very important as well, very important part of capturing your requirements and making sure you're hearing everything your stakeholders are saying to you. The second week of core skills happens on week 3, and we're going to move into some of the more technical skills required of the BA, talking about written communication and documentation skills. We are responsible as BAs for putting other people's wishes in writing, I guess you could say, through our requirements gathering and documentation process. So we're going to talk about the importance of writing very clear and concise documentation. Going to talk about some mapping and some modelling and some of the tools that we use as BAs in helping create some understanding is in relation to process mapping and modelling. We're also going to talk about verification and negotiation skills, knowing that sometimes the BA has a pretty difficult role to play in making sure that all of the requirements that we gather are not just accurate, but also that they're going to be the best fit for the organisation, and they're going to help solve the business problem. So sometimes our stakeholders are not all on the same page, unfortunately, and there may be some negotiation or conflict resolution required from the BA's perspective to help get everybody across the line. We're then going to talk about change management skills, and change management is one of my favourite topics in the whole world. We're going to talk about the importance of change management and ensuring that the BA is aware of the things that need to happen to make change stick in an organisation, rather than having short-lived or unsuccessful change that isn't embedded in the organisation. And then we're going to round out our short course. It won't feel like 4 weeks. I bet it'll go by in a flash. But week 4, we're going to talk about building the BA career. So we're going to talk about gaining some experience as a BA. You might be already performing in a BA role, so you might be more interested in building some networks and, of course, finding some really challenging and fun BA roles. And it's such a great career path and it is so rewarding. So I'm sure that there'll be plenty of interest in that one. I'm just going to change slides to talk about the course purpose. So this is an introductory course. There is another introductory short course that IT Masters ran a little while ago. Guy mentioned Brenton Birchmore. For those of you who've been around CSU or IT Masters for a little while will know how wonderful and talented Brenton is. He did a course a little while ago on business analysis and an introduction to business analysis, which was aimed at discussing some of the tasks that a BA performs and really understanding the role of the BA. This one is a little bit different in that it's really aimed at people who are looking to commence a career as a BA. As I said, you may have been just thrust into the role recently, or you may be seeking a BA career path. So this is all about learning the skills required to effectively perform the BA tasks successfully. So the two go really nicely together. I know Guy is going to come back and talk to you next week in relation to a bit more detail about IT Masters and the short courses, but you would have already been in and had a bit of a look at learn.itmasters.edu.au, and you'll see there that each week we've got the course content set out there for you to follow. That will consist of course, the weekly webinar, which, as I said before, hopefully most of you will be able to join me for. But we've also got some pre-recorded audio lectures there that I've put together based on each of the topics, some readings, and of course we finish up at the end of the course with a multiple choice quiz for you to complete to successfully round out the course as well. So I just want to guide you through the topics and the webinars. So as you know by now, there are 4 topics. The first one is highlighted in red for this evening. We're going to be doing our weekly webinars from then on. So week 2, Core Skills for the BA Part 1 will be held on Monday the 22nd of October at 8 p.m. Australian Daylight Savings Time. So if you're not in a daylight savings area or you're not in Australia, please make sure that you work out the difference on your clock there. Week 3, Core Skills for the BA Part 2 will be on Monday the 29th of October, same time, same channel. And week 4, Building the BA Career will be on Monday the 5th of November, again, same time, same channel. I might just take a pause there, have a bit of a breath, and just see whether or not Guy has anything that he wants to discuss with you or any questions that he wants to direct to me.
I do, and while I'm doing that, maybe I'll launch this poll as well. We're just wondering how much experience people have as a business analyst who are taking this course or at least attending this webinar. So for those of you who have never been in a short course before, Zoom has the function of polls, but unfortunately we can't display them in the recording. I'm sure there's a way, but I haven't figured it out, and I'm sorry for that. Anyway, you've got 5 answers for questions, and that's why I read them out. You've got none, 0 to 1 year, 1 to 2 years, 2 to 5 years, or 5+ years. And the majority so far have none.
That's great, Guy, and it just gives me a bit of an idea as to just the level at which to pitch, of course, but also some things to point out to you guys along the way as well. And also, I can see there that quite a few respondents are saying that they have 5+ years experience as a BA, so it'll be fantastic to get their learned perspective on this as well. Seeing as the poll results don't come through on the recording, it might be worthwhile us reading them out. Do you think, Guy?
Yeah, and I'll just share them on the screen now. We've got 54% with none, 18 0 to 1 year, 13% 1 to 2 years, 7% 2 to 5 years, and 8% 22 years. And that's with about 85% people answering out of 330 attendees. And that's, yeah, as Karen was saying, those people that have lots of experience will be so useful in the forums. So if you have any questions to augment your understanding of this course material or just I guess spitball ideas, that's a great place to do it.
Absolutely.
So I'll stop sharing that.
Thanks, Thanks, Guy.
And away you go. And just a couple of quick questions while we've got a break. Not so much a question, but Ibrahim Bangura wants to say hello to you, a former student of yours, I believe, in the
Hi, Ibrahim.
program in
Nice to
portfolio
see
management.
you again.
So that's one out of the way. I'm sure there's going to be quite a few of your ex-students in here. And a question from an anonymous attendee: what is the difference between application support and business analysis? Is this course useful for application support?
Yeah, look, it could be useful, but definitely more focused on the business analyst role. So the business analyst is really about solving business problems. And as we get through the webinar this evening, we're going to talk a lot more about the business analyst's role and the objectives of the BA, which is beyond support. It's about really helping an organisation to understand the business problem that it's trying to solve and trying to avoid an organisation jumping to conclusions about what might be needed from a technical solution, and really exploring business problems fully in order to get a full picture of the organisation and what it needs, and then going out and trying to find solutions to those problems, or to that problem in particular. So there is a technological component to that. We do talk about that in this short course. We're going to talk about the importance of ensuring that technology is aligned with systems and processes, and of course people. So there is a component there, but it does go beyond that application support type role, where we're going to specifically try to solve a business problem through putting together a comprehensive and holistic solution aimed at not just the technology, but the other very important parts of an organisation as well.
Beauty, thanks very much. Maybe I'll keep the rest of the questions for a later stage.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. All right, so moving along, the things we're going to cover in tonight's webinar, as we've only got about 40 minutes left, we're going to work through why business analysis, which is going to carry on from what I was just saying there in response to that question, about why it's important and how it's come to be, understanding the BA role and also the objectives of business analysis work, understanding the organisation and its environment, and really analysing business problems to make sure that whatever solution we come up with really nails the problem and isn't just a kind of a best guess or something we've chucked in there to see how it works kind of thing, which some of you might know in your experience in organisations does happen from time to time. All right, so just wanted to get into, oops, went too far, sorry guys, get into my first slide, the business of business analysis. So this slide is really just to introduce you to the rise and rise of business analysis. In the pre-recorded audio lecture, I discussed how business analysis first came about, and it was through the personal computing era that really started in the 1980s and continued to expand then in the 1990s. And as you would know, has shown no signs of stopping ever since. And what's powerful about that is that, you know, this technology that we now have access to, that we didn't have access to in the way we do now previously, has led us to understand that we're in the midst of, you know, a continuous now IT revolution. And it started back then, but it shows no signs of stopping, as I mentioned before. So the IT revolution, though, is a two-edged sword for business. Whilst we can do things faster and more efficient, and technology gives us more options than we've ever had at our fingertips before, it does also mean that sometimes we have more choices, and more choices can mean sometimes more potential for things to go wrong. So whereas, you know, years gone by, if we had a business problem, if there was one piece of technology that even got close to solving the problem, we'd snap it up with both hands and kind of just jam it in there and make it fit. And we would worry about how the people and the processes and all of that sort of thing could work around the technology, because that was the only choice we had. But nowadays we've got more choices than that, and nowadays, with everything that we know about IT and how wonderful technical solutions can be, there's so much more option available to us, and we can either design things from scratch, we can have access to bespoke and customised technology, but that means then that we have a greater responsibility than ever before to make sure that we're doing the right thing and we're choosing the right potential solution. So we don't want a situation where we just go and buy the first thing that we see, although sometimes that still does happen in a lot of organisations. We want to make sure that we're creating a solution to a business problem that is not only going to solve that problem, but is going to work seamlessly with the rest of the organisation as well. So from the 1980s and 90s, we started to realise that we needed somebody to come along and solve business problems. We needed somebody to look at the different technological options that there were out there and decide which one was going to be the best fit for our particular organisation and our particular problem. So I think I've mentioned in the pre-recorded audio that there's probably always been BAs. I mean, the role itself as a business problem solver probably always existed. We just didn't call them business analysts, and now we do. So the role is about solving problems, but it really did sort of pick up a lot of steam through that IT revolution and the event of personal computing and the rise of personal computing. So through that, it began to be realised that there wasn't a lot of structure around business analysis, that people kind of had a bit of an idea it was about solving business problems, but there was no formality around that. And so we needed to get that happening. And so an industry was born. And through that industry, there started to become professional bodies created, methods, processes, structures, and we started to see business analysis really rise as a profession. So you'll see there I've got the IIBA mentioned in one of the dot points on my slide. So we now have a professional body, the International Institute of Business Analysis. Those of you who've been around project management for a little while would know that there's a project management institute, and they publish something called a project management body of knowledge, which is everything we know about project management written in a body of knowledge. So the IIBA plays a similar role for business analysis, and they've produced something called a BA BOK, which you may or may not have seen around, and it's all of the processes and structures and methods that we've come to know about business analysis all captured in one body of knowledge that we can then go and utilise. And these BOKs are living documents. The idea is that as we learn and as we grow, as we find out more about business analysis and we become more effective through changes in processes and the way we go about our roles, that will continue to be updated, and new versions of the BOK will come out and will continue to rise and rise as BAs. I wanted to talk about some of the core principles of business analysis, because I think these really help to set the scene about what the BA does, as opposed to some of the other professions that are involved in software development and change management. Oftentimes, you know, people tend to sort of say, oh, the BA role could be fulfilled by anybody, but we know now that the BA role does require a very specific and specialist skill set. Not to say you all have to be specialist BAs. Some people are general BAs, and that's great too. Choosing a specialisation as a BA is something that you can do down the track of your career if you choose. But the core principles of business analysis are, you know, the same for all BAs. And that is that we look for root causes rather than symptoms. So as I said previously, sometimes when an organisation has a problem, they look to where the cause of the pain is, and they say, oh, we're experiencing this potential problem, and so therefore to solve that problem we need to do this, that or the other. But what they're actually doing by going ahead and purchasing or building a solution to fix that problem is that they're actually dealing usually with the symptoms rather than the root causes of the problem. And so, you know, a business analyst might come along to an organisation and be pointed to a problem, and they'll see a mess, and, you know, the temptation there is to just clean up the mess, to just fix the mess up and make the floor tidy again. But the problem with that particular idea is that the problem will come back tomorrow, and again the next day, and again the next day. So what the BA does is look for the root causes. We don't try to treat the symptoms. The symptoms usually take care of themselves once we've treated the root cause of the problem. We also look to improve the business, not just the technology. So this sort of harps on about the, or harks back rather to the question we had before about the difference between the BA and some of the other roles in relation to software development. Our role is not just a technology-based one. Our role may have come about because IT provides solutions to business problems, but it's not just about improving the technology and letting everything else fall into place around that. It's about improving the business as a whole. And so we need to look deeper than the technology. We also need to look at the processes and the systems and the people and the way it all works together in order to make the organisation run as smoothly as possible. We also need to look for alternatives and options, not just the obvious solution. So sometimes we might have a manager or a director, someone senior in the organisation come to us and say, we've got a problem, but I already know what we need to do about it. Here's what we need to do. And I can sense some of you nodding your heads in agreement if you've been a BA for a little while or you've played the role of BA and you've had someone senior come along and say that to you. Oftentimes the organisation thinks it knows what's best. And sometimes they're right. Let's be honest. I mean, they're not always going to be wrong about that. Most senior managers know their organisations and their people and their technology very well. But the job of the BA is to just not take anything at face value. The job of the BA is to look at all of the different alternatives, to look at all of the different options that might be available to us. There's more than one way to go about it. And to help the organisation pick the best way and the way that's going to provide the most robust and best solution that's going to have the greatest longevity for the organisation. And looking through all those options, we need to choose the one and help stakeholders to come to the realisation of the best one. And our solutions have to be feasible, reasonable and sensible. So there's no use having a fantastic solution that the organisation can't afford or having a solution that's just not going to work with a process or a group of people because it's not the way they want to do things. So it is about making sure that we cover off all of that as well as part of our solution recommendations and helping create the solution, embed the solution. And that leads me to my last point about managing change all the way through the life cycle. If you have worked as a BA on a project before, some of you may have experienced a very truncated BA role where maybe you were brought on to the project halfway through when the solution had already been selected. And perhaps your tenure as a BA was terminated just after the requirements were gathered. You know, the organisation said, oh, we've got our shopping list now. We don't need any more help with this. Let's, go out and find the solution ourselves or build the solution ourselves. And I think that really devalues the role of the BA and the benefits that the BA can provide. The role of the BA is one that most effectively runs throughout the entire life cycle. The earliest possible involvement of a BA ensures the earliest possible identification of the true root cause of the business problem. It enables a holistic solution to be created that takes into account not just the technology but also the processes and the people. And also then helps with the gathering of requirements and the implementation of the solution, which most people see as the key role of the BA, but also right through to benefits realisation, right through that change management process, making sure that whatever we've created as BAs actually sticks. You know, a lot of organisations with in particular the rise of technology have actually seen that whilst they might have had the right solution and a well-managed project, for some reason the solution just didn't stick. For some reason the change just didn't take in the organisation, and there's been rollback or there's been some kind of issue with the solution being adhered to permanently. So the BA has a real role to play there in making sure that the solution actually delivers benefit to the organisation. So it is a real go-to-woe organisational position, not one that just comes along for selected parts of the ride. However, that said, sometimes we are there for selected parts of the ride and that's okay as well, but the true benefit is really realised when the BA is there for the entire duration of the project. The other thing that we do as BAs is negotiation rather than avoidance or confrontation. So you would have obviously gathered by now that the BA is there to solve business problems and to work with different stakeholders to help devise a solution that's going to meet their requirements. So oftentimes there are going to be different perspectives at hand. There are going to be people who see things from one point of view and people who see things from another point of view. And that's okay, but the role of the BA is to get those people to come together for the common good and to achieve a common goal. So our role is one of negotiation. Our role is getting stakeholders to get on the same page, getting stakeholders to understand the potential benefits of something, and maybe to get them to compromise or see, you know, the good in letting something go to achieve something for the greater good. It's not a role for avoidance, and it's not a role that you know, relishes in conflict or confrontation either. We have really sound conflict resolution skills, and we always try to make sure that we address problems rather than to avoid them, because avoiding them is a little bit like the solutionism I spoke of before. It just really buries the root causes, and we don't want to do that. We want to flesh it out, get it out in the open, and make sure everyone's happy, and that's how we make sure that change sticks as well. Guy, was there anything that you wanted to come in with there at this point? Any questions or anything that you wanted to
Yeah,
notify
there's
me about?
quite a few questions. I suppose I'll just try and distill them. Will this course be talking much about the role of a BA from within different project management schools?
We've tried to keep it fairly agnostic of any methodologies. We're trying to stick to the BA role itself, although there are some different nuances depending on whether you're a BA in an agile environment or a BA in a PMBOK or a Prince 2 environment. No, we're tending to stick to pure business analysis and not really focus on any one individual component of that. But there's certainly comments that I'd make along the way in relation to the different methodologies.
Beauty, thank you. There's also a lot of questions around, I guess, boundaries of the BA role, because it is a fairly, I guess, unknown quantity to some extent. And my understanding is that this course will go a lot of the way to answering those questions. So maybe hold those questions off.
Yeah, one of the things in the pre-recorded audio I talk about is that there are some commonalities between the BA role and some of the other roles in relation to software development and change management. You know, we have some common ground with the project manager in that we all work with stakeholders and that kind of thing. But there's also some very vast differences as well, and I do point those out along the way. So those questions I think probably will be answered in due course through the webinars.
Beauty, thank you. And then I guess the final one for now is sort of the extent to which, you know, notwithstanding the fact that you were talking about, you know, technology not being the whole solution, looking at the broader picture, the extent to which this will be IT specific, this course, or about IT industries, because there's a lot of course, IT masters, short course students who are interested in, for example, networking or something more technically focused.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, there are a lot of different types of projects out there. You know, we're definitely not going to be talking about construction processes or, construction projects or anything like that. We are strictly talking about technology-based projects. But this next slide will just give you a bit of an idea as to what I'm talking about when I talk about the holistic approach. So we're not focusing solely on technology. We're focusing on technology as a solution to a business problem that aligns and fits in with the rest of the organisation. So this poppet approach that I've got up on my slides now just is a diagram that shows, courtesy of Assist Knowledge Development there, a diagram that shows how you know, information and technology needs to be part of the overall solution to the business problem that we create, the solution that we create as BAs, or the solution that we ask our software developers to design and create as BAs. So it basically says there that the solution itself is the core part, obviously. The information and the technology are going to be the solution, and they are going to, you know, be the thing that's going to solve the root cause of that problem. However, we can't just take that in isolation. We can't just look at technology and ignore the fact that there is an organisation that that technology has to live within, and that there are processes that have to, work with that piece of technology, or that there are people who have to work with that piece of technology. So this holistic approach is really about saying that we understand that as BAs, the solution that we come up with is not going to operate in a vacuum. It needs to be part of the organisation. So everything from our policies and procedures to our hierarchical structure, everything there needs to work with whatever this solution is that we're going to come up with. And our processes, whilst, they may need to be redesigned, are not redesigned to fit the technology, but or retrofit to fit the technology, but are optimised and improved alongside the technology. So whilst any business change, whether that's technology based or not, is going to require some form of change to processes or to people, we don't want the IT side of things to drive that change. We don't want the solution to be the driver of the change. We want the business problem to be the driver of the change, and we want the IT and the processes to work together to solve that problem. And of course, last but not least, definitely not least, is the people. And the IT has to work alongside the people as well, making sure that we take people along on that change journey, making sure that the people side of the business is not forgotten, because without the people, none of this is going to work. You can have the best solution in the world, backed up by some fantastic processes and aligned to the organisation's strategy and policies and procedures. But if the people aren't on board, it really isn't going to happen. And that's why we tend to see a lot of change fatigue in organisations now, because the pace of change is so relentless, and we have such dynamic organisational environments. People are really starting to get fried. They're really starting to get sick and tired of all of the different change that's going on. None of it seems to be embedded well. We just seem to be getting used to one lot of IT or one lot of processes or one, organisational strategy or policy, and then, we're asked to change to the next one and the next one. And so people as human beings, we don't tend to cope with change very well. Whilst there is a small element of the population who really do enjoy change and enjoy the challenge it presents, most people, and it is the human condition to want the status quo. So if we're going to try and get people to change the way they do things and adopt this technology and really have it work for the organisation, we've got to make sure those people come along for the ride too. So this course is really aimed at the skills that the BA requires to make this happen. So whilst we're going to be talking strictly about IT-based projects and not any other type of projects, it really does focus on the core skills that the BA needs to be able to do this effectively for IT-based projects. One of the things that we do to kick off with is a process called enterprise analysis. Now, I cover this in one of the audio lectures. We do both an enterprise analysis and also an environmental analysis as BAs. And what that means is looking at that very top part of the triangle on the previous slide, where we're really trying to understand the organisation. Now, some of you have said you've got some extensive experience as BAs. Some of you have said you've got no experience as BAs. So regardless of your level of experience, some of you might have, those of you who have experience might be business analysis consultants. It may be your role to go into brand new organisations that you've never worked in before and get a full picture of that organisation so that you can make sure that the technology and the solution that you're about to propose is going to work and is going to fit. It may be that you already work in the organisation, maybe in a functional area of the organisation, and you've been picked up as potential BA talent. Good on you. And your role is going to be one where you're going to play BA. So you may not be a professional BA, you may not be a member of the IIBA, and you may not be wanting a career necessarily as a full-time BA, but you've been put into this role and you've been asked to perform BA tasks. And so one of the things that you need to get a thorough understanding of is the organisational environment that you're operating in. And even if you've been an employee in that organisation for some time, I'd suggest this is a really good starting point for you to come in with a fresh set of eyes so that you can see the root cause rather than the symptoms. Come in as if you were a consultant who's just been appointed as a BA in the organisation to conduct an analysis of the business problem. So it all starts with understanding the organisation itself and identifying, where the organisation is up to, what are the things that are causing this business problem, and just to get a bit of a grounding and an understanding of where we're going. So the first thing is, the internal side of a SWOT analysis. In one of the audio lectures, I talk about the SWOT analysis, SWOT being an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And of course, we need to think about what are the things that are going to, be potentially our strengths, or what are our strengths? How do we do it better than the competition? And what are our weaknesses? What are the things that we perhaps don't do as well as the competition? And also, what are the things out there in the external environment that potentially could be opportunities for us to benefit from or capitalise on? And what are the threats out there that might potentially be things that we've got to make sure don't bring us unstuck? So doing this environmental analysis allows us to have a look at all of these different factors. It also allows us to get a bit of a feel for where the organisation wants to go. So any project or any change initiative that's being undertaken in any organisation should be in alignment with the organisation's strategic objectives. And I always say to junior project managers, if you've been handed an assignment or a project, and you're looking at that project and you can't see a fundamentally clear link between your project's objectives and the strategic objectives of the organisation, go and have a chat to your sponsor about why you're doing the project, because really projects are just a vehicle for us to get from a position where we are at the moment, which is an undesired state, the current state of affairs where things are maybe not as great as they could be, to get to some future desired to be state where things are going to be better. And so that to be state really needs to align with the strategic objectives of the organisation. We really should be, through our projects and through the solving of our business problems, taking our organisations on a journey to a better place. And if we're not, then why would we be doing it? Because projects cost a lot of money and time and resources. And the BA role is about determining the optimum path through this journey. So I've just got a couple of little, very, very simple diagram there that has on my slide. Those of you who are my past students will go, oh, she's not going to draw, is she? But yes, she is. I've got the as is situation here. So this is the part where we are at the moment, and we don't necessarily like it here. Not as much fun as what we would like. So here's the situation in the future in alignment with the strategic objectives of the organisation. Here's where we want to go. Now, there's a number of ways we can get here from where we are now, but the BA determines this optimal path. This is the best way that we can get from where we are now to where we want to be, attacking the root cause of the problem and making sure that everyone is on board. One of the ways that we can do this analysis is through something called a MOST analysis. And again, I cover this one. I cover some things in the audio lectures that I'm also going to cover in the webinars, because sometimes a picture does paint 1,000 words, and the MOST is probably one of those that is better explained in a diagram format than through just listening to someone speaking. But the MOST analysis is another acronym. You'll find business analysis is full of them, that talks about the mission, the objectives, the strategy, and the tactics. So looking at this organisation, what's the purpose and the function of this business? Why are we in business in the first place? What do we exist to do? And what are our objectives? What are our measurable goals? And what's our strategy? What's our high-level approach to achieving those goals? And what are our tactics? What are the detailed means that we're going to use to implement the strategy? And what we need to ask ourselves as BAs is, how's our project going to align with all of that? Where is this business problem that we're experiencing, and how does it fit in with all of that? And if we can get a clear picture of that, then we get a clear picture as BAs as to the next step, which is really detailed analysis of the problem. So what I'm saying here is that before we can even get to the problem, before we can even start looking at the problem, we really have to understand the environment that the problem operates in. because a lot of times the problem can be environmental. And so if we do just jump straight to the problem and say, okay, Mr. or Mrs. Sponsor, what seems to be the problem here, and go around and talk to all the stakeholders, we may be missing some of the key clues that exist right back here at this very foundation level of what's this organisation about, what makes it tick, and how does this business problem manifest in this organisation. I want to talk about some of the different perspectives. Guy, please do feel free to interrupt me at any point in time here if you've got questions or things that might be relevant to any of that enterprise analysis stuff.
Thank you.
Will do. One of the things that I wanted to go through with you is the different perspectives. So we're going to be talking to stakeholders, and we're going to be talking to them about the organisation and the environment that they're working in, and then move on to discussing the business problem in detail with them. So one of the things that's very important to remember as a BA, and this is why we're going to spend so much time talking about the soft skills of the BA and the people reading and some of the other things that you probably think, oh, sounds a bit airy-fairy, Karen. Well, look, it might sound that way, but really to be a really effective BA, we have to really understand human beings. It's not a psychology course, but it does talk about how important it is to understand how people come to the table with very different perspectives, and they come from very different backgrounds and different points of view. And that's key to really deciphering what it is they want, because there's so much miscommunication out there in projects about what people really want. And, somebody might say something or not say anything at all, and then, by the time we get to the end of the project, they're wishing they'd said something else, or maybe they didn't know what they didn't know, or they didn't know what they really wanted. And, the effective BA is one who's able to cut through all of that, and one who's able to, help people facilitate and guide people to understanding what they don't know to get to the root cause of a problem. So it's very important that we understand people's different perspectives, and the organisation has a range of perspectives, and our stakeholders are going to live in one or more of these camps. So we've got our financial perspective, which is all about the financial performance of the organisation, the use of financial resources by the organisation, leverage, return on investment, shareholder value generation. So people who come from the financial perspective are very keen to make sure that this thing is going to stack up, that this solution to this business problem is not going to cause the organisation to, fall into bankruptcy or exposed to some other sort of financial risk, and that there's going to be a return on investment here, that there's a solid business case that says if we spend this money, if we take this time, if we use these resources, that we're going to end up gaining something and we're going to end up benefiting financially, not just a feel-good benefit, but an actual benefit that delivers to the bottom line of the organisation. And so some people are going to be very firmly focused on that financial perspective. Some are going to be really concerned with the customer perspective. And as I go through these perspectives, I don't want you to think, oh, well, obviously the finance people are going to be concerned with the finance, and the customer service people are going to be concerned with the customer perspective, and so on. Anyone could be concerned with any perspective. It's not necessarily role driven. And, the good BA doesn't make any assumptions about the perspectives people are coming from. They do some thorough investigation to find out. So those who are coming from the customer's perspective are really the key stakeholders that the organisation is intending to serve, the resources, the sources of revenue and value. Our customers are our most precious asset. They're the ones who consume whatever it is we deliver, so they're the most important people to please. And so people come from that perspective are really interested in making sure the customer's happy, and really little else matters to those kind of people. They're just firmly focused on the customer, and their rationale is that if the customer's happy, the finances will take care of themselves. There's some merit in that, I guess. The people who come from the process perspective are people who want to optimise things. So they're people who are concerned with quality and efficiency of our products and services, making sure our processes are working well together and aligned, that there's hardly any waste, that all our processes are suitable, and that our processes are delivering benefits. And then there's people who are concerned about the capacity perspective. So they're looking at the human capital, the infrastructure, the technology, the culture, and our ability to leverage all of these factors to empower our resources and to make sure that we're running on all cylinders in the organisation. And you will find that some stakeholders are a real mix of those perspectives. And so the good BA is able to identify where people are coming from and how they've managed to form the views issues that they have and use that information to help build a better solution. Moving on from enterprise analysis now and getting into more of the environmental analysis. So I mentioned before that all organisations operate, within an external environment, that we don't operate in a vacuum. It would be easy if we did, because then we could just plod along and do our own thing. But unfortunately, we are at the mercy of the external environment. And I don't mean the weather, although that is part of it. That's the second E in this PESTLE model. So PESTLE is an external industry model that, again, another acronym, my apologies in advance, to show the forces that influence your business and to really have a thorough look at all of these different things that, that might be impacting on the business. And this can really help you to identify how some of these business problems might have come into existence, but also might help give you some clues on what things you might be able to do to solve them. And whilst we can't necessarily influence any of these things, we can influence the way we react to these things. So the P in PESTLE stands for the political environment. Those of you who live in Australia will understand that sometimes in Australia the political environment is quite entertaining. We have a change of Prime Minister quite often, for example. But it's also to do with, making sure that, the country is well governed and, what's happening with imports and exports and taxes and, all of those sorts of things. So how is our organisation being impacted by that? And in relation to that, that's some of how, also the source of some of how compliance projects come about. The government makes a decision, a guideline, a change, and all of a sudden we have to start doing things differently in our organisation to now comply. The first E in PESTLE stands for the economic environment. So that's all in relation to, the market, demand and supply, all of those sorts of factors that determine, how things are going. So if we're in the midst of an economic downturn, we might experience a drop in sales, and, where our organisation might want us to investigate that and solve that problem. It might not be something that we necessarily can solve with a piece of technology. We might have to, do something else to wait until the economic climate picks up. The S stands for social. So this is all of our demographical information, how society works in general, things like, your age and your gender and how that might influence people's buying patterns and behaviours, that kind of thing. T is for technological. So again, the rise of the amount of options we have available to us technologically to solve our business problems is one reason why a lot of projects are born. Whereas previously there wasn't a solution to our business problem, we just had to plod along and deal with it as best we could. Hey presto, new piece of technology gets announced and developed, and we now have some options to deal with that. So that may lead us to run a project to take use or make use of that effective technology. The environment, we're talking about the physical environment here, so we're talking about droughts, we're talking about floods, we're talking about climate change, we're talking about all of the things that might potentially impact on us, the physical environment of the organisation, its location, those sorts of things and how that might impact on us. And last but not least is the legal environment. What are the things that we have to do to make sure that we stay ahead of the game and to make sure that we're not in breach of any laws when we're doing particular things. So these things are not just the causes of some of our projects, but also things that might impact on our projects as well. So it's really important that we get a very clear picture of the external environment and what's going on. I mentioned the SWOT analysis before, so that's looking at both the internal and external factors in the organisation, the positive and negative factors to make sure that we understand, what our organisation's doing well, where do we need to improve, where are the places that we can build up our strengths and capitalise on potential things that might come our way, and where are the potential causes of harm for our organisation that we need to minimise or maybe eradicate altogether if possible. So just take you through the stages of problem solving. So as I mentioned before, the BA is often brought in at the point in time when the organisation realises, hey, we've got a problem. That's the mess finding. That's we're usually pretty good at finding the mess, but then we have to get some data to support that, really identify the key cause of the problem itself, then potentially go out there and have a look at where the potential solutions might be, looking at all of the different alternatives, as I said before, not just looking for the obvious one. And the BA then has a role in making sure that that solution is acceptable to everyone. And so that's where that negotiation and conflict resolution stuff comes from. Some of the traits of the BA, I go through these ones in more detail in the audio lecture, but a good BA is one that has tenacity, one that has drive, one who's a very thorough person, a critical thinking person, an analytical thinking person, and someone who upholds with the utmost professionalism as well. Very important traits for the BA there. And all of those things can be learned, of course. And that gets me to the end of my presentation. So I've got about 4 or 5 minutes to spare there, Guy. If I can hand over to you. I hope I haven't left you too short of
Beauty.
time to wrap up.
No, that's all right. And I'm quite happy to go a little bit long if that's all right with you.
Sure.
Excellent. Some of our other short course mentors go a very long time, so that's not a worry at all. Okay, so I've got quite a few questions. A lot of them are just sort of like, are we going to talk about this? Are we going to talk about that? And a lot of them I've tried to answer, and some I thought might be quite useful.
Okay.
We'll start with one from Ibrahim from before. Normally, how long does it take a BA to deliver business improved system for an organisation? Is that and I suppose that it'll go without saying that a lot of these questions will be maybe answers.
Yes, yes. So, Ibrahim, to answer your question there, it's a bit of how long is a piece of string? It's going to depend on the nature and the complexity of the project. So, whilst in this course we're not going to, you know, strictly adhere to one type of project or one size of project, you know, for very large projects, that's obviously going to require a lot more effort and therefore a lot more time. One of the things that I will talk about as we go on is, you know, some very large and complex projects have teams of BAs. You know, they might have 4 or 5 BAs working on a project to shorten up the time frame of requirements gathering and solution finding and so on. And for other projects that might be smaller or maybe less of a priority to the organisation, they might just appoint someone in a functional role to serve as a BA 1 day a week. So it is a matter of, you know, horses for courses there, trying to understand, you know, the nature and the complexity of the projects, but I wouldn't say there's a given time frame at all. Oftentimes I will just say that we're rushed, that there's definitely a keenness from our sponsors for us to, you know, get this done as quickly as we possibly can, unfortunately.
Thank you. Andrew is an architect, but can't always count on having a BA to support him. He's wondering about whether this course will cover the BA process that he needs to fill when that happens. I guess my question is it possible to sort of utilize the skills that we're going to be talking about in this course on an ad hoc basis?
Absolutely. I think, you know, this course is not just great for someone who wants to start a career as a BA, but also for someone who is, and I will use the term throughout the audio lectures, I apologise if it's offensive, but the accidental BA, someone who is required to play the role of BA, to use the BA skills and to create the output that would normally be required to, you know, of a BA when your role isn't actually BA. And as a solution architect, Andrew, you know, it's very important that you be able to understand what the stakeholders want from your solution so that you can design something that is going to fit and that is going to work for them. And so if you don't have a BA, you are the BA. So I definitely think you'll be able to utilise the skills that we'll cover in this short course to be able to do a better job of you know, talking to your stakeholders and really finding out the true needs that they have.
Great, and I think that'll probably tie into the answer for a few of the other questions that we have here. For example, Aldo asks about how much IT literacy a BA should have, and I suppose the same could be said of any field. And then Jem's asked questions about are there any sort of prerequisites for a BA, for example, a business administration degree or a management degree or accounting, etc.
Some people come into the BA career as general business graduates and then, you know, or IT graduates, and that's how they start their junior roles as a BA. But it is really interesting. That second last question you asked, Guy, can you just repeat that one? Someone asked a question there.
about whether there's any sort of any prerequisites in terms of degrees
No, the one before that, somebody asked somebody.
Oh,
Sorry.
so Aldo was speaking about how much IT literacy, for example, a BA should have, I guess the question could be asked of any particular specialization.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I really think that is an interesting one because the level of IT literacy, it is something that you do have to be able to pick up because we are going to be talking to uh, people from different perspectives. And oftentimes the BA is the conduit between two very vastly different perspectives. So we have to be able to take the management speak of the business people and we have to be able to explain that to people like Andrew, who are going to then design and build the solution. And we also have to be able to do the same in reverse. We have to be able to talk to Andrew, who's our solutions architect, and really get an understanding of what he is designing and building, and being able to translate that back to the business stakeholders and say, is this going to work for you? Because they're the ones who are going to use it and operate it and work with it on the ground once it becomes the solution. So we do have to have a reasonable level of IT literacy, but I have to say you build that on the job, and depending on the type and nature of projects that you're exposed to, a lot of this BA skill set is learned on the job. And whilst you might come with a degree in business or IT, and you might have some background knowledge there, really the skills that we're going to talk about are things that you will develop and gather experience with on the job.
Beauty. Laura has asked, do business analysts document workflows and processes and documentation fully, I guess?
Yes, they do. Yeah, so we do all of the requirements documentation for a project, and we also do all of the mapping and modelling. So one of the topics that we cover in week 3, which is part 2 of our core skills for the BA, refers to creating things like swim lane diagrams, business process maps, and so on.
Great, thank you. And speaking of documentation, Katrine has had an excellent idea, I think. And asking, is there a document that covers all the acronyms? Is there any sort of glossary that we can maybe use as a resource on the learn.it masters page? Or
Yeah,
is there one
fabulous
already?
idea. I think I think it's a fantastic idea because there are so many acronyms in the BA and IT space, of course. And one of the things I do talk about in one of the topics is the importance. I think it might be the written documentation topic. I talk about the importance of when you are documenting requirements, and unfortunately, sometimes we do have to use some of the technical acronyms or the jargon. Making sure that they are clearly explained to people, so that there is that understanding. Because if people don't understand, they won't participate, and we can't have that as BAs. We need everyone to participate, and we need everyone to understand. So that is an excellent point, and I think we'll create a glossary, Guy.
Great, looking forward to
Making
it.
a note now.
Yep, beauty. I like this question. This is an anonymous attendee. Is the BA responsible for determining the solution?
Yeah, so the BA is supposed to work with the stakeholders to determine the optimal solution and then make recommendations. So one of the things that we will prepare or help prepare is the business case document, which outlines all of the different potential options that we have available to us and makes a recommendation out of all of those different alternatives as to the best way to go. And that's following all of the consultation with the stakeholders, the requirements gathering, and so on. It's not to say that in their infinite wisdom, our steering committee or our board, depending on what methodology your project's operating within, will go with that. But if we've done the work and we've provided the justification, then I think they'd need a really good reason not to.
Beauty. And then Ronnie comes up with a question that, of course, follows from that. How do you deal with a moving goal? In other words, the ever-changing requirements from businesses or from other stakeholders?
Yeah, look, that's tough. And I guess, some of those traits of the BA that I've got up on the slide there, the drive and the tenacity and the professionalism can sometimes be tested, from the BA. It is difficult when we've got a moving target. And I think one of the things that I've learned as a BA is never get too attached to your own work, and to really allow, the organisation to shape the solution and to really take their own path, and don't get too offended if what you've put forward is not going to work. One of the things I talk about in one of the topics is the importance of making sure that you don't take anything too personally, because what you will come up with in terms of diagrams and potential solutions and things, and you'll work very closely with your solutions architects to come up with something that you guys both think is just fantastic and brilliant, and you'll put it to the stakeholders and they'll pick it apart or just say flat out, no, that's horrible. And so you kind of go back to the drawing board. So it can be a bit tough, but you know, that's the job. It's always fun, always a challenge.
Collins asked, if you are one of the accidental BAs, how do you sell to executives the benefits of a formal BA role? And speaking of the executive level, is there value in having a BA or two on the executive board?
Yeah, look, someone who's got BA experience or knowledge is someone who is always invaluable on a project board or a steering committee, because they do often look beyond what other people just accept as an off-the-cuff solution. And they'll have an appreciation as well of the amount of time it takes to do all of this stuff. I have often said to people before that, you know, the best work of a BA is, or the most time-consuming part of the BA role, your work's in the bin. You know, it's a matter of what you didn't present sometimes that has taken the time, because you often you know, will go through several drafts of something or several views of something before you come up with the perfect thing. But they don't see that. They see the 3-page document that you've just put forward, and they'll say, oh, what's she been doing for 3 months? And that can be quite tough, and it can be really difficult to try to you know, convince an executive to use a BA. Particularly BA consultants can be quite expensive, and so there is this myth out there that only really, you know, complex projects need a BA. And there's also a bit of a myth that the project manager can be the BA or the solutions architect can just be the BA. And look, you can on a small and fairly simple project that, you know, you can certainly utilise the skill set to do a good job. There's no reason you can't. But, you know, to understand that, you know, every project you're putting a lot of resources on the line, you're putting a lot of time and a lot of money out there hoping for a return on investment. So, you know, why wouldn't you go and spend a little bit more money and get someone on board who's got the skills and the experience to really make sure you're doing the right thing? I think I said it in one of the audio lectures, but it was a quote that someone actually said to me only just a few weeks ago, and they said the first step on the ladder to success is to make sure you've got it leaned against the right wall. And I think that's a pretty important thing. You know, if you've got a BA, you can really maximise the investment that you're about to make. You know, you could go and spend a lot of money on a project and, you know, use a lot of resources and waste a lot of time on the wrong solution. And I think we've all been involved in those projects, and we know how costly they are, not just in terms of finances, but in terms of change fatigue and you know, people walking away jaded from a project experience that's gone wrong.
Beauty. Well, thank you very much for that. We're just about 10 minutes in, so, or 10 minutes over time. So maybe I'll keep all of these questions over, and if anyone does want to follow up on them, please feel free to start discussions in the discussion forums. Every module has a forum attaching to that particular webinar. You can, you know, come up with any questions out of it, and like we saw in the poll, there's a decent percentage of people that have a lot of experience. We'll all be checking the forums as well, and sort of getting involved as well. So it's a great place to sort of build on the webinars. And I suppose we can talk about what's coming up next week, if that's okay, Karen, just briefly.
Perfect, Guy, yes. So next week we're going to start on the first topic to do with the core skills of the BA. So as I mentioned earlier, that's going to be around the soft skills of the BA, the time management skills, because we are so busy, you know, what's an important job versus what's an urgent job. We're going to talk about, you know, building rapport with your stakeholders, how to make sure that you're really thoroughly engaging them and getting them motivated and enthusiastic about the benefits of the project. And just talking about some of the verbal skills and also the presentation skills, and making sure that we're effective at facilitating groups of people, and also, you know, working with individuals to get the best from them.
Beauty, looking forward to it. I guess all that's left to do is thank everyone for coming tonight. Still 325 attendees, so it looks like everyone's stuck around, so that's a good sign. Thank you also, Angus and Chantel, for looking after the chat and for looking after the learn.itmasters.edu.au webpage, where you can find all of your resources and where the recording will be tomorrow, as well as any other resources and acronym glossaries that we come up with. And of course, thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. See you all next week.